Basketball season is right around the corner. We dive into our 10 thoughts today. Going to discuss some Joe Girard. Been a lot of buzz recently on maybe if this is a bounce back year for him. We'll dive into our thoughts on that, plus a little bit more about that win over Virginia Tech, some leftover thoughts, and more on the topic of will Syracuse go bowling as we look ahead to their last 4 games. It's all coming up on the Locked On Syracuse podcast.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in, Tim Leonard, Tyler Aki. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen. We're here with you every single weekday, free and available wherever you get your pods and on YouTube now as well. Subscribe to the show on YouTube if you haven't already. Going to be dropping some of our interviews from over the summer that you might have missed that are still topical. We put out the Cole Swider one, a couple more that we're going to drop as well, and you can watch those soon. And also today's episode sponsored by Rock Auto, which has amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need. Just visit rockauto.com. Tell them Locked On sent you. So we did this last year, Tyre, 10 thoughts, which is basically, I guess, the 10 burning questions or topics going into the season here. It's our preview series for Syracuse basketball. We're going to discuss the 10 biggest things over the course of the next week and a half or so, leading up to the official first game November 9th, but they do start exhibition play this week. As many fans know, Wednesday night they have Pace in the Dome. But our first one, Joe Girard, I feel like this has been on a lot of people's minds recently. I saw our pal James Zuba wrote something where he was talking to Joe Girard about how Joe's trying to prove the haters wrong this year. It's personal to him. And I like that attitude from him, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's good that he's forward-facing about it.
The chip on the shoulder stuff is always interesting year to year. And this is a guy who last year, I mean, talk about someone who caught hate. Freshman year, everyone loved him, right? Everybody loved Joe Girard. But then sophomore year, he couldn't start for Siena, right? Listen, he's not that bad. I think he's more like freshman year Joe Girard. And listen, I think a lot of unfair expectations and praise was probably heaped on him to begin with, just because people saw the high school stats and thought he was going to come in and average north of 20 points a game eventually during his Syracuse career. He'll probably never average 20 points per game at Syracuse. He doesn't need to, okay? He needs to be an effective three-point shooter for this team and a distributor. And I think given the makeup of this year's roster, it positions him a lot better to do that.
Yeah, is he going to have a full-on bounce-back year? I don't know, but
what
I
would
will
you
say
qualify as a bounce-back year for him? Is it if he can put up those freshman year numbers, or does it have to be slightly better than that?
Well, the freshman year numbers weren't all that great anyway, like in terms of efficiency. When you go back and look at that, 33% from three, 38% from 2-point range. He shot at 78% from the foul line, which actually, I'm looking at last year, sorry. So, but they're pretty similar, like 32% from three as a freshman, 38 from 2-point as a freshman.
The free throw thing was weird. Like, this was a guy who was automatic, shooting about 90% from the stripe, and then he goes down and drops below 80. That was the oddest part of his statistical disparity from last season to his freshman season. And that's how I kind of figured, something's up here. Something mentally, there's something that's between the ears isn't right with Joe Girard. I don't know if it was a confidence issue, whether it was the COVID slump that he kind of went through, whatever it was, something was not right with him. And then towards the end of the year, he started playing a lot better. I mean, you look at him shooting in the NCAA tournament, he was shooting 43% from three during that stretch. So he definitely picked it up as things got deeper and deeper. And it's kind of like Buddy. Buddy found his stride once we got into ACC, the latter portion of ACC play, and then into the NCAA and ACC tournaments. Joe Girard, I think, wasn't quite at that gear, obviously, but he definitely was starting to find something as the season progressed.
Yeah, so I think that you hit on some good points there because Buddy also had COVID, and I do think that played a factor. And I think it might be overlooked by a good portion of the fan base how much that COVID impacted him. And Jim Boeheim came out and said it. It wasn't like they used it as an excuse. I thought that was the right way to approach it from them. And I think it was a confidence thing that started by him falling into not really his tip-top shape because of COVID and losing his shot a little bit because of that, because that's a big part of where his confidence stems from. Plus, you had Kadari sort of breathing down his neck, and I don't know how much that played a factor. I don't know how much it's going to help him now that he is kind of definitely the guy this year. I mean, Symir Torrance is a nice piece that I'm hearing good reports about, but I think we all can agree that he's probably not going to be as good as Kadari was or as threatening as Kadari was to Joe's starting point guard role this season.
Right. I mean, well, I think Joe kind of learned last year too. He's untouchable, right? From a starting perspective. I mean, if we didn't see Kadari Richmond for extended minutes, and again, I don't think Kadari could have really given you extended minutes. Did you see what Jim Boeheim said about him?
Yeah,
at the media day the other day? I mean, that was pretty scathing stuff, that Kadari essentially didn't work on his game. He didn't work on his conditioning, and you could tell. And listen, he wasn't totally wrong. Kadari could not have played more than 25 or so minutes. You saw some of the defensive lapses he had at the end of games. It was just a matter of, okay, is the trade-off worth it? Where is a 70% Kadari defensively better than a 85, 90% Joe Girard at the end of the game, fatigue-wise? And I personally still probably would have taken the 70% Kadari, but there were some really bad moments for him defensively too.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. So it's interesting because you brought up, all right, is his numbers just going to go back to freshman year? And I think that there's a perception out there that if you looked at, if you didn't really know a whole lot about Syracuse, you would just assume that he had this huge drop in numbers last year. It wasn't good. I think what happened was he just didn't have the sophomore leap, Joe Girard. So now is the sophomore leap delayed a year, basically, and this is going to be his breakout year. And I'm not exactly sure. I definitely think he's not going to get worse. I think he's going to be better than he was last year, at least slightly better. And I do think there's potential for him to have a quote-unquote bounce-back year or have a breakout-type campaign. And I love the way he's talking, because just the way that he chatted with James Zuba in this article and the way he played in that orange versus white scrimmage, which I'm not going to take a ton away from, and I couldn't even watch the game.
I'm going to take absolutely nothing from it. I didn't watch it either, and I will take nothing from it. In fact, I am better off for not having watched the orange and white scrimmage. I'm going to say it. Like, I'm better off.
Sure, but at the same time, will you take something from these exhibition games coming up? I mean, I'll take a little bit from that.
Bits and pieces, but not a whole heck of a lot. I want to see what happens when the real games start, right? Like, beating up on a D2 team is not going to do it for me, okay? Yeah. I want to see what happens when you're going up against D1 competition, especially this preseason, or not preseason, but non-conference slate, because you're playing some really good teams this year in the non-con. When you get to the Battle for Atlantis, when you take on Villanova, Indiana, you're going to go up against some really talented players, some really talented teams. There's some All-Americans that you're going up against this season in Gillespie and Trace Jackson Davis. So you're going to have your work cut out for you. And it's going to be guys like Joe Girard that I think are going to make the difference in these games. I want to see, my big Joe Girard thing is this. Usually when you go from your freshman to sophomore season, especially at the point guard position, you're going to cut down on your turnovers. He had a 5% increase in his turnover percentage from freshman to sophomore season. And that's my concern. If he can slice that down back to more of what he was getting his freshman season, and probably a little bit better if it was in the 10 to 12% range for turnover percentage as the point guard, that'll make me feel a lot more comfortable, because I think if he's not turning the ball over, he's worrying a lot less. And when you're playing a little more free and you're not worrying about the little mistakes that you do on one end of the floor, that's going to contribute to an all-around better game. And I think he's got the players around him too, where he's not going to have to worry about it as much. He's not going to be asked to make some of these dump-in passes anymore to guys like Quincy and Barama. No, it's going to be a more perimeter-based offense, which in theory should not lend itself to more turnovers.
Yeah, and of course, Boeheim came to his defense in media day. He had a funny sort of segment that I saw, a clip where he was saying, well, people forget that these internet haters forget that Joe wasn't a point guard in high school, and he's still learning basically how to play the point guard position. Hopefully this is that year where he does develop into just a better decision maker, because we know that he does have these flashy moments. He can hit those deep threes. at the very least is making defenses have to guard you out there, which sets up more opportunities for Syracuse, even if he's not quite firing on his shot. Like, we understand all that, but you do have to be a point guard at the end of the day. Like, that's a large part of his role, is bringing the ball up and making sure it starts off on the right foot.
Another thing, too, is with the free throws, okay? He wasn't attacking the basket nearly as much last year. I don't know if it was some sort of lingering injury. Like, I think back to, remember Frank Howard when he had that injury in that 2018-2019 season?
I think we made that comparison last year.
We might have,
and there was times where I was just like, oh my gosh, there's been no layups. I think it was like 6-7 games into the season, and we had this joke about how long it took.
And with Frank, too, I mean, I'm trying to jog my memory, the exact number, but I think he didn't shoot a free throw for the first 7 games of his return. He was clearly still injured with something where he wasn't attacking the basket. Now, I think part of what Joe Girard and his decision-making to attack the basket stems from is, I'm going to hit a couple of threes and then force the defense to come out on me, guard me a little bit tighter, and then I'll blow by them off a pump fake. Well, he didn't have that same luxury last year because of the way that he was shooting the ball from 3. And I think that, so he played 4 fewer games last year than he did his freshman season. 32 freshman year, 28 last year, yet he shot about half as many free throws. I want to see that free throw number get up, and I think it will, because he's not going to have as many guys attack or defending him off of the dribble as well on help side stuff, because you're going to have Cole out there, you're going to have Buddy out there, you're going to have Benny/Jimmy out there. I think there's just going to be a lot more spacing where if Joe Girard can win some one-on-one battles with his defender, he's going to be able to get to the basket and get to the free throw line a lot more.
Right, and what you're describing there is kind of the next step in Buddy's development as well, which is getting the free throw line more.
And that's one thing that he was doing that a lot at the end of the season.
Yeah, but he still could do it more. Like, that's what elite players do. And I'm wearing my Celtics shirt right now. Like, that's the thing with Jason Tatum is I watch him just consistently shoot these step back shots. I love Jason Tatum, but when you're nitpicking, what are they able to do to get to that next level? Like, for him, it's just keep your head down, keep driving. Buddy was doing that with his pull up and stuff. He still didn't get to the free throw line as much as maybe other All-Americans.
But I also don't think he needed to as much. I think it would help someone like Girard a little bit more, especially if he's struggling shooting the ball. Sometimes getting to that free throw line, seeing a couple free throws go through the hoop, it ups your confidence. And this is a guy who I think for the majority of the year last year was lacking in confidence because of what was being said on the internet, what was happening with the COVID stuff, not getting into a rim. He was lacking a lot of confidence last year, I think, until that ACC tournament when he started to turn things up. And then he ended up being a 40% three-point shooter to close out the season.
Right. And that's something Jim Boeheim said about Buddy. Like, that's his next step, is getting to the foul line more. I think he would say the same thing about Joe if he was asked about it. But let's take a quick break. We'll have more thoughts on Joe Girard in just a little bit. And just want to remind everyone, especially college football fanatics out there, that Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. We love Prize Picks. We know you guys will too. They are the leader in college sports daily fantasy right now, offering more college football props than anyone in the world. And they offer all kinds of players, Power 5, mid-major. The cool thing is now as basketball season is getting going, you can do cross-sport stuff with Syracuse as well. So you can take an over on Joe Girard three-pointers or points probably, and couple that with Garrett Schrader's over in yards or something fun when we do have one of these crossover weekends coming up. I know November 13th, November 14th, that's going to be one of those weekends when they've got Drexel on the Sunday after playing Louisville on the road. So we're getting to that time of the year. It's a great time to download Prize Picks, the award-winning app right now. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. Prize Picks is safe and offers fast withdrawals. I've been using it a lot. I've been trying to do what I can to earn some off of Sean Tucker's over-unders. He burned me this week, but I'm still probably going to go back.
Not
to Sean
pleased
Tucker.
Enough with his performance this week.
Still pleased, but would have been more pleased, I guess, if it was over 118.5. But anyway, check out prizepicks.com. Use our promo code that's locked on, or go to your app store and download the app today. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy.
This episode is also brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts that you need. So why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer only with the brands their warehouse happened to carry? You've got computers and phones with access to rockauto.com. So save time and money when you use Rock Auto. Why spend 30, 50, sometimes even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business that's been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years now, and their prices are reliably low for every single customer. They've got everything, whether it's brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, or even new carpet. Go to and explore their easy-to-use website and find the solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now, see all the parts that they've got available for your car or truck, and this is the important part, right? Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Again, rockauto.com and write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need, rockauto.com.
So continuing our conversation on Joe Girard, and I want to shout out James Zuba's article on Noon's Magician, a couple quotes that we've been referencing here. This is what Joe was saying to him. He said, "It's more personal to me. I want to prove all those people wrong on the internet." He definitely brought up the internet, and it seems like he was reading a lot of it.
He's active online too. You'll see him on Twitter a fair amount during the season. I mean, I'm thinking back to
noted Red Sox
team.
Fan, Joe Girard,
is he?
Which I'm all for. Yeah.
This is a team that is pretty active on the internet. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
And last year's team was pretty active on the internet too. You don't have anyone doing that. Like, what is Tom Brady or who's the guy who does like LeBron? He did like the 0 dark 30 where he goes silent in the playoffs, gets off of social media or whatever. You're not seeing a lot of that on this team, and that's fine.
Right.
I mean, I don't think the social media noise is the worst thing in the world. I think it's overhyped.
It can be, but
it can be if you let it get to you. But I think these athletes are a little thicker skinned, and they've just been living with it too their entire lives. Where I don't think it's as big of a deal as it used to be, as people make it out to be. Let's put it that way.
Right. And I like Girard's attitude here. He says, personally, I think I've taken a big step. I think a lot of it is confidence as well, but that comes within working hard. I've been in the gym each and every day, still doing it until this day. I've worked with GMAC a lot. I've worked with the coaches a lot. At the same time, I'm doing stuff on my own, which really matters. So I don't know. I after reading that article, I became more confident in a quote unquote bounce back year from Joe Girard. And his numbers last year, 9.8 points, 3.5 assists, 1.4 steals, shot it right around 33% from three. I would say in order for it to be like a true bounce back year, and what I'm thinking from him, what I'm projecting this year is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 13 points per game, because he's going to have to be a pretty big part of this offense if they're going to be good.
I'm not as concerned in the points per game department. Here's the two places actually I want to see improve. And I guess I sort of hit on one, so I'll make it three. The turnover percentage, which kind of correlates to my next point, and the other place I want to see him improve, the assist rate be up a little bit. I think he's got the tools on the perimeter with him where that can really be something that rises. And I just want to see the 3-point and overall field goal efficiency improve. I'm not as concerned in the counting stats of the points per game with Girard. If he gets me 10 points per game, but he's shooting around 40% from three, and he's averaging 5.5 assists per game, I'm cool with that. That's what I would rather see, because I think you got more scorers on this team. When you look at Buddy, he'll probably take some sort of a leap scoring-wise. You got guys like Benny, who's going to get a piece of the pie. Cole, I think you've got some more offensive-minded centers as well when you look at Jesse and Frank Anselm.
Yeah.
I think the collective at the center position is going to lend itself to more offense. And then Jimmy Boeheim as well. I just think it's going to be, you've got more weapons out there where, okay, Girard comes out, he hits a couple of 25, 28-foot threes, and you don't need more than 9 to 11 points from a guy like Joe Girard. I think if he's sitting in that neighborhood, as long as it's more efficient, I'm cool with it.
Yeah, I agree with that. If he plays like he did in the NCAA tournament, I'm all for that. It was a lot of assists in the tournament. I think he did finish the year. 4 of his last 5 games were in double figures points-wise, if I remember correctly. But
yeah,
so put out the poll.
ACC tournament. I've got him right here. I got the game log. 14 against NC State. He struggled and only had 3 against Virginia, but looking at that game, he was doing some other things. He had 6 rebounds, 4 assists in that game. And then NCAA tournament, 12-7, actually 12-7-6, 12-7-6, and then it was 12-1-1 in the loss to Houston. So you saw him play much better basketball. He was shooting around 40% from three during that time. And that lends me to one of the other points. And this is something that got brought up with him, and I think he even talked about it a little bit last season. The factor of crowds and how much a player like him feeds off of the energy of the crowd. They had crowds at the NCAA tournament. There were fans in the stands for it.
Right.
And that's when you saw him play his best basketball. I'm trying to think back through the ACC games. Was there a single ACC game where he had fans in the stands?
Gosh,
I'm trying to think back, but
maybe Clemson.
If it was Clemson, he had 19 points against Clemson.
Okay, well,
so I don't remember.
For some reason, that stood out. That could be wrong.
I don't remember
that's
what
a good
the
point.
protocols were, but that was something that got brought up with him last year. And you're hoping that as a guy like him, I mean, he does seem like a guy who feeds off of the energy of the crowd. Hopefully, now that these places are going to be filled up again, I mean, there's a couple instances from last season where you really wish there was a dome crowd. I mean, the Allen Griffin chase down block against Buffalo is the one that immediately comes to mind. And if you have crowds in these arenas for those sort of moments, and even on the road too, I mean, sometimes with a guy like Joe Girard, I'm sure he loves the booze too. I think he feeds off of that just as much as he does the dome standing and clapping.
Right. It's like when he had that great game against Notre Dame. I know that was at home, but just the jaw talking with Prentice Hub and stuff like that. I think that does feed into him. He's such a competitor and his multi-sport background, all that stuff. But all right, so we put out the poll. What are you expecting from Joe Girard this year? Option A, huge bounce back year. Option B will be slightly better. Option 3, more of the same. Option 4 should be a bench player. I should have just put should be a Sienna for option 4. Or just Sienna in one word.
MAAC.
So will be slightly better, 47% of the vote. That's the most right now. 33% going to huge bounce back here. So mostly optimistic here. More of the same, just 13% should be a bench player, gets 5%. Our guy Justice Hodge, 22, said huge bounce back year, and he averages 17 and 5. I think his ceiling, it sounds maybe crazy to some people, but I think it's possible. He could be an all-ACC player, I think. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that's his ceiling this year. And that's what we were calling for going into last year. It just got so derailed.
Yeah, 17. I'll put it this way. He could have 11 or 12 a game, but it feels like 17 or 16 a game because they're timely buckets and just he's going to be creating a lot of offense. That's what I want to see. I don't necessarily need to see it in points. I just need to see it in the points and assists. I think, and that's something that I've always wanted to, I want some sort of basketball statistic that encapsulates like your points responsible for. Like I know in soccer, like you get 2 points for a goal and 1 point for an assist, right? I want to see something like that sort of encapsulates how many points you're responsible for over the course of a game. And I just want to see Joe Girard have that sort of impact. I don't need to see gaudy numbers from him. I just need to see improvement and efficiency out of him because those are some things that we have not seen out of Joe Girard in years 1 and 2.
Right. It's going to be interesting too. And I would say I lean towards will be slightly better with the majority, 47%.
Yeah, that's where I voted.
Right. So it'll be interesting. I think in order for it to be a huge bounce back year and to qualify as that, he would have to really up his approval rating with the fan base, like the Twitter mafia, that whole crowd, the internet haters, I guess I should say. And if he does get to that point, then it would probably take a lot, but I hope he gets to that point because we're a much better team when he's playing well. And also Symir Torrance is a nice piece, but if we're going to be the best possible team, it's Joe Girard running the show at point this year.
That's a perfect point because I think Joe Girard's the difference between this team being on the bubble again and maybe being a top 25 team.
Yeah.
Right?
Him and Jesse Edwards, I would say. The two, or pick your center. But
I feel like, though, you kind of know you're going to get something really strong defensively from Jesse. I mean, just the center depth in general is much better this year. You're hearing all this stuff about Frank Anselm. So I feel pretty confident about what the floor of the center position might be. It's with Girard because he can be the one that elevates them to the next level. Whether it's with facilitating, if he figures out the jump shot from deep and starts shooting more towards the 40% that we saw at the end of last season, That's the difference with this team. And defensively, if he's going to make his contributions on that end of the
I'm
floor.
glad you brought that up. We haven't touched on his defense.
And that's huge. That's a hand up technical foul on us here for not doing that. But, I mean, it was a struggle last year defensively. You saw him get pulled from games. And I mean, I don't know what Samir Torrance is going to look like in the zone, but I do want to see a stride defensively because, again, he doesn't have the makeup of the guys that you see at the top of the zone. He's 6'1", and it's not like he's spectacularly long. He's athletic and he's strong at the top of the zone.
So that is our first 10 thoughts on.
But I would still like to see a little bit more.
That's our first of 10 thoughts. Right. That's our first of 10 thoughts here on the basketball season. Stay tuned with us all throughout the week and next week as we get you guys ready for the season in that regard. But for a few weeks now, we've been talking about SweatBlock, these wipes that stop sweat for 7 days. It seems that people have been listening to us. We have friends of Locked On who tried SweatBlock and loved it. We love to hear from you guys. Also, another success story out there. Avid soccer player right now. He heard us talking about SweatBlock. He thought it was too good to be true, but he was always the wettest guy after practice and games, like soaking wet. So he thought he'd give SweatBlock a shot. He tried it on his pits. The next practice, his pits were dry. Well, everything was wet. Guess he should try it on his other parts too. He says he didn't have to reapply for 9 days. Now is a true believer. Just one more strong testimonial of SweatBlock there. Locked On listeners, you've got to try it out. It stops excessive sweat for up to 7 days per use. It's doctor created, doctor recommended. Dry shirt guarantee. If SweatBlock does not keep you dry, you get your money back. It's one of those situations, and it's not just for your armpit. Anywhere, chest, back, feet, hands, use it anywhere. That stops sweat, basically. If you or someone you care about is dealing with excessive sweat, you have to check out SweatBlock. Get it today for 20% off at sweatblock.com. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON for 20% off at sweatblock.com or at an Amazon or a local CVS store. All right, so we touched on this at the tail end of yesterday's podcast, but the question, will Syracuse go bowling? I was on the side of yes, not really thinking about it a whole lot. I think you said no, Ty. They've obviously got 4 wins right now. There's 4 games left. Let's see if I can rattle this off. BC at home, Louisville on the road, NC State after that, but there is a bye after BC. And then you round out the season with Kenny Pickett and Pitt, which looks like maybe the best team in the ACC, if not Wake Forest, at this point. I will say now.
Watching Pitt, they are the best team in the ACC. I mean,
they look good.
What did they put up? 28 points against Clemson the other day?
Yeah.
I mean,
27,
we've
I think.
Seen how good we've seen how good that Clemson defense is. And putting up 28 points, doubling the amount of points any team's put up in the regular season against Clemson.
Syracuse,
that showed a lot.
Yeah, and honestly, it also showed how good Clemson's D is in a weird way because they were averaging 48 going into that game. So the fact that they were held to 28 is like saying something.
Listen,
and
Pickett's moved his way into the Heisman conversation now, too. I don't know if you've seen this. In fact, I even threw a small wager with our friends over at BetOnline.ag a couple weeks ago when he was at 40-1. And now I think he's like 10-1 or something like that. So he has certainly cemented himself in the conversation. Some people are calling it, I think Brent Venables, the defensive coordinator from Clemson, said he is like this year's Joe Burrow with the numbers he's putting up. And just, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. He's gunslinging with a team that really, like, he's the older guy there. And he's seen pretty much everything he needs to see in college football. And this is the year everything's coming together.
Right. He's been there 80 years, so it's finally starting to pay off for him. He's always been a pretty good quarterback, but he has taken a big step this year. So that's the schedule remaining. The reason why I say yes is because I like their chances against BC. We're going to preview that game on our Friday podcast. BC struggling at the quarterback position. They have real issues right now. Seems like you're able to run on BC. They're also able to run it, which is a little bit scary given how much Virginia Tech gashed us on the ground last week, but early preview of that is I like our chances there. And then you've got NC State on the road, NC State's
Louisville on the road.
Louisville on the road. So those two, Louisville's first off a bye. I like our chances against Louisville as well. I just think we're going to be in all 4 of these games. And we've already had a couple not go our way. We have had a couple go our way in Liberty and Virginia Tech. But to me, if they're going to be competitive in all 4, which seems likely, barring a major injury or something, then they should be able to reel off 2 of those 4.
The problem is that in these close games lately, they're 1-3 in them, and I think that it starts to lend itself to a trend. I honestly think it's going to be
2-3, right? Like if you count
I
Liberty.
get. I'm talking about an ACC play against opponents
Sure.
that you're familiar with, because down the stretch here, you're playing against teams that you play against every single year. There's game plans installed for you every single season, and that worries me when it comes down, because a lot of these, I think, down the road are going to come down to coaching, and the coaching staff has shown that it has failed these players time and time again over the course of the season. They have won in spite of the coaching this season, and I just don't trust it. I mean, look at all these coaching matchups. Is there a single one where you trust Dino Babers over the opposing staff?
No, I mean, the Louisville coach, Satterfield, yeah, he's sort of TBD on how good he really is, because they've just been up and down. But I think he's done a good job this year. I mean, Louisville's a solid team. I'm not saying that's
Louisville's
we
a
got
solid team.
crushed
I mean,
by
like,
them last year.
Yeah, and they
then again,
not
we
only
got
did you get crushed. I mean, yeah, seriously. But like last year, there were a lot of deflating losses. Louisville felt like one of the worst when you were getting shut out 30-0 on a Friday night when everyone's watching. It was embarrassing.
Yeah,
and I don't know. Hopefully, this is one of those games. I think back to when Josh Black was talking in the preseason, where he said, "I had to come back because I couldn't leave that sour taste in my mouth from a year ago." That Louisville game should be one that he's pointing to, as we can't let that happen again, because that was embarrassing. And quite frankly, I mean, all of these teams really put it on, and not really BC, but like it was not even close last year.
NC State was
these
close.
Games. I'm trying to remember the NC State game exactly.
It was like a forgettable 32-26 type deal or something. I forget the exact score, but it was relatively, they covered, I'm pretty sure.
Either way,
NC State's good. I guess what I'm saying is, all right, if they beat BC, you have one of the last three. And for me, the real question is, can Garrett Shrader take it to another level? And by another level, I just mean, can he be as good as he was against Virginia Tech? Yeah, for the last 4 games, basically.
Yeah, because he's not going to beat a lot of these teams just running the football the way he's been. Listen, they'll put up points, but they're not going to win games.
Like he's kind of doing.
I don't know.
I'm not saying
he hasn't won games with that, though. He's won games when he's thrown the football well. He threw the football well for a half against Virginia
We won
Tech.
Liberty, and he didn't really. I mean, he just did it with his legs. Him and Sean Tucker, which they're a package.
But I would say that game was a little bit more on the defense, because they came up with a big stop at the end that put them in, or the big turnover at the end. And this is a defense that hasn't gotten a lot of turnovers this season, but they came up with the big one at the end that set them up in field goal position. Otherwise, I think that team I think they probably lose that game with the way Malik Willis was playing in that second half. So I'm still probably saying no on a bowl game this year. And it's funny because SP Plus, Bill Connolly's metric that he has at ESPN, he just came out with his bowl predictions for basically the chance of each team to get to 6-6. He has Syracuse at a firm 50% right now to get to 6-6. Yeah. And honestly, that feels about right. You're on one side, I'm on the other side. And I think we both feel it's very close to getting to that other side, right? I think it's relatively close. Like, I think they win 1 game the rest of the year. Do you think they win more than 2?
I mean, they could, because my thing is, I think they've turned a corner here, and they played solid football to pretty good football since Garrett Shrader has taken over. The Clemson game looked really bad, but Clemson's defense is just really good. So I'm excusing that a little bit. They still lost the game by 3 and could have tied it late. I think what we're seeing is they turned a corner, and now the question is, did they blow too many chances in that stretch where they could have won games to the point where they're not going to make it to a bowl game? I would say they're only going to play better if they stay healthy from this point on. And I think they're not going to play every game close, right? Like at some point, they should just have a dominant performance. And if they only have to win 1 of their last 3, I feel like they can get it done.
Or, I mean, it could go the other way. A team figures out how to contain Garrett Shrader in the pocket and turn him into a pocket passer and limit him that way. Kind of do what Clemson did to him. Because, listen, Clemson's got players. And listen, some of these other teams have some really good defensive players as well that they're going to see down the stretch. But I think schematically and from a game plan standpoint, if people go back and watch that Clemson tape, there's a way to contain Garrett Shrader. Because what did he run the ball 7 times in that game? If you've got some athletes at linebacker, you're going to be able to contain Garrett Shrader. And I think that some of these teams down the stretch, like I look at Pitt as a perfect example. Local kid, Servassier Dennis, made the great pick 6 against Clemson the other day. And you think he doesn't have a little bit of a chip?
Too.
Yeah. I mean, I remember watching him in high school when we were at school. Where was he? Was he CBA, I think?
I can't remember, but yeah.
But it's like there's some of these guys that athletically I think are going to pose a mismatch defensively down the stretch. And that's what I'm worried about, because I think schematically, if teams just go back and watch that Clemson game, they're going to find ways to limit Garrett Schrader. And also, I need to see Garrett Schrader be healthy the rest of the way too, because I mean, is there a guarantee he's playing against Boston College right now? He was pretty dinged up. And if
I think he's got to be out there. Yeah.
But, I mean, okay, he may be out there, but listen, if those ribs are a little bit shaky because rib injuries, you're a completely different quarterback. If you're dealing with some rib injuries. He's
been playing through an injury. This is pure speculation, but to me, I feel like he's already been playing through stuff. Even the way he's been running, and maybe it's just he kind of never looks super fluid when he's running. He just has those long strides, but sometimes he doesn't look as crisp of running as he did when he had some of those straight line, like huge runs and a couple.
And that worries me, because if he doesn't have the legs, I mean, you're not going to get much out of the quarterback position.
Right. I guess what this comes down to is I just think I'm a little more optimistic on Schrader, which means
I think this comes down to, can you win one more road game? Because I don't think you're going to beat Pitt, and I feel decent about the chances against BC. That obviously, I think both of us, BC is the most winnable game the rest of the way. But Louisville, it's going to come down to, can you win a road game? And I don't know. They've struggled on. I know they got the one against Virginia Tech, but they have had their struggles on the road under Dino Babers over the course of his tenure. So,
but
they've had struggles with Dino Babers in November too, and a lot of it's been health related.
Right. Hopefully that bye week, maybe gets us a little bit more healthy. And I don't know what the status of the offensive line health wise is too. Like this BC game is going to be interesting. What lineup comes out and how good Schrader looks health wise. But all right, we've gone long. We will recap, or we'll cap our Tuesday podcast there. Tomorrow on the show, we got the exhibition game coming up, so we'll probably talk a little bit about that. That game is against Wednesday night against Pace. We'll get you another 10 thought on the basketball season. We'll have to figure out what's next on our burning question list.
Yeah. Most impactful newcomer tomorrow.
Oh,
because I think there's a lot that you could pick from here.
Yeah. That's a good one. All right, so that's next. That's our next 10 thought on tomorrow's Wednesday show. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts every single weekday. Also, check us out on YouTube. Follow the show on Twitter, and we'll talk to you guys tomorrow.